Okay, we are live. So, good morning, everybody. Lance Tarchioni here with you on Ask the Agronomist. Got my good friend and colleague, Mr. Scott Stein, with us here today, and I'll let Scott explain who he is and what he does. So, we're coming to you live from our building in St. Louis. I've been here in town for 2 or 3 days this week at some meetings. Scott was in an all-day meeting today with big wigs and he's another big wig, by the way.
Yeah.
And he was gracious enough to give us some of his time here. And I get feedback, Scott, that people's favorite episodes are the ones where I have a guest.
Okay.
And so I have taken that to mean that less of me is better, and they like other people here. So anyways, Scott and I go way back. We used to be peers, and he's went a lot further in life than I have, and I'll let him introduce himself and talk about what his role is here at Bear, and we'll just kind of kick that off. So, welcome.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Thanks for having me. So, no, it's fun to get to talk to folks from the Illinois group and so forth. I grew up in the southern part of the state. Went to Illinois. Started my career as a crop scout, and consultant, pulling soil samples, all that good stuff.
Okay.
But ultimately ended up in the seed business in 1990. 1998.
Okay, so basically, right when everything happened. Then I didn't realize that I thought you had been at DeKalb for a while prior to
No,
that.
I was a crop consultant, independent crop consultant down south, and then moved to DeKalb, Illinois, as a DeKalb agronomist. So that's where we crossed paths.
Yeah, I would have been at the time, Asgrow was but prior to DeKalb, Asgrow was the only seed company that Monsanto then owned, and I had been an old Monsanto guy who became an Asgrow guy. Funny story, most people thought I left Monsanto when I went to Asgrow. They didn't really realize that we owned it at the time. So I was an Asgrow agronomist when Scott was a DeKalb agronomist, and then we kind of brought all those businesses together. That was kind of a wild and crazy time. Lots of things changing, and I learned something here. I think I just always associated you with Northern Illinois because that's where your territory was. I'd kind of forgotten that you were originally Southern Illinois.
Yeah, no, I'm a proud Carlisle Indian, home of Carlisle Lake.
618er.
I'm a 618er, I had myself and Dan Zink and a few other legendary folks from Southern Illinois that are part of the Illinois team. So, loved it. But those were fun times. Launching all that technology back then.
Right, and that's back when, DeKalb sold beans and Asgrow sold corn. And, DeKalb was, always more of a corn company, and Asgrow was always more of a bean company. And for several years, we both brands sold both. I've got a seed guide collection that goes back to like 1995, I think. And it's kind of fun to look back at those old seed guides and see when DeKalb had beans and Asgrow had corn.
Well, you've had the pleasure of selling two famous white cobs, haven't you? Asgrow 730, which was one of the biggest sellers in the market at the time, and now 6835.
Yeah, and I think Asgrow 730, if you counted all the people that were selling it at that time, it would have been the number one in the market.
It was one of the biggest in the market.
Yeah.
Unlike DeKalb 626.
Yeah, I don't think it was legendary for different reasons.
Sure.
I can tell you one thing that I remember about those times. I mean, Asgrow never really made it as a corn company.
Right.
They always had a dream. The dream never came true. DeKalb in the 90s we'll be honest, that was a tough stretch for DeKalb.
Clean years.
And then we had Holden's at the time. And when those three things came together, there was some pretty cool magic that happened. And you took three brands three companies that really individually, none of them really had, Pioneer was the big dog at that time that we were all chasing. And bringing all that stuff together that had never been together before with some technology and some traits and some smart people and some good investments and maybe a little good luck, I don't know, and some pretty miraculous things came out of that combination, and that was a pretty cool time to be in the seed business. That's really when Monsanto got in the seed business was in that era. prior to that, I started with Monsanto in '93,
Mm-hmm.
and we were doing some early field research on Roundup Ready soybeans,
Mm-hmm.
but we were primarily a chemical company that was investing heavily in biotech, but hadn't made a dime in it yet. It's funny. You'll get a kick out of this. The old chemistry people that I worked with thought biotech was just a rat hole that we were throwing cash down, and it made them mad because
Yeah.
we were making a living off of Lasso and Roundup,
Mm-hmm.
and you couldn't get, if a research project wanted to do something on chemistry, they couldn't get $10 out of the company. And somebody came up with an idea, it was biotech. It's like, here's $1 million. Do something cool, And so that was the early days of biotech. And in the mid '90s, I spent a little bit of time down here in St. Louis. And so yeah, Scott and I crossed paths a long time ago. He's always been one of the good guys, and it's always cool when somebody with Illinois roots is in a leadership position in the company, and he's always been somebody that stayed very down to earth and knew what was going on out in the world. And he has to make difficult decisions that not everybody in the field always thinks is what we ought to do, but that he makes the big bucks to make those kind of tough decisions. So I guess what is your role today?
Well, today I lead the North American corn business, and really what that means is I manage a team that essentially identifies and builds the portfolios for all our different seed brands and licensing business. And then so I got a group of agronomists that do that. We also have then kind of a group of business managers that kind of figure out, okay, what's the price volume, how much we need to have to support the business, and then make sure we got a life cycle plan for the ones coming in and ones going out, et cetera.
Right.
And then I also have a team where we're responsible for all our new technology launches. So whether it's Preceon, Corn Room 4, some of our other innovation that we got in our pipeline. We pick that up when it's in about stage 3 of R&D, where we've committed to apply, or put it into the regulatory process. We'll start picking it up and start building out the launch plans, everything associated with that. So work really closely with everybody, our teams, whether it's sales, whether it's product supply, breeding, corporate, we're kind of in the middle of everything.
Right. Well, and you kind of, all those different groups need to have, the ability to, work together and talk to each other and communicate well. And, you're kind of the glue that holds all that together in a way, I would say. So we had Josh Tooley on our last episode.
Excellent.
So Josh should be on your team,
yes.
Right? Drop another name. So Casey Perry would be on your team.
Casey has been on my team. She now does the same thing I do on soybeans.
Okay. All right. So she would be your peer on soybeans. So another Illinois field person that far exceeded what Lance has accomplished in his career. So that's one nice thing about being around here as long as I have been. I knew a lot of these people before they were famous, and it's kind of nice. So I guess let's talk about some stuff that gets you excited today. Some things, and there's things Scott can't really talk about because it's proprietary secret stuff, and so we kind of talked a little bit about before we went on air here what's okay to talk about, what's not okay to talk about, and he knows those things. So let's just what's on your radar as far as things that you are excited about that you're able to talk about. I guess.
Well, for those that have followed our pipeline, obviously Preceon is number one. We're intentionally walking this a little slower because we do feel it has tremendous potential, and we do know that when we get to our biotech version of that trait, which we hope to have approval by 2028, will allow us to really unlock our genetic potential, be able to produce hybrids that can fit all the different situations across the Midwest and North and South. And I do think that technology, shorter stature corn, more resilient corn, will be the future. 10 years plus from now, I think most corn acres in the Corn Belt will be this technology. And why not, right? You've got added protection, resilience there. and we can manage it in a way that I think will allow us to take yields to the next level.
So if I can ask you a clarifying question on that, do you envision we will breed Precion hybrids that are adapted to all acres, or are there some acres that will stay traditional corn, or have we even made that decision yet?
Well, here's my it's an open book, but from what I've seen, I would say, if I look and search the market, there's about 16% of the acres that have 150 bushel APH or less.
Okay.
And or at least the county average, it's 150 bushels or less. Right. I'm not convinced that we can fit that acre. All the other acres, I believe that we can either through breeding or just through management of the technology apply this to those acres. Yeah. We know it's got deeper roots, faster growing roots. That increases its water, gathering capacity, but it's still short corn, and droughted corn or stressed corn will just get shorter, right? So that is the only limitation. We do have the ability to modify the ear height based on the germplasm and things that we bring it in, and it's just a matter of the opportunity versus the effort to do that.
Yeah, somebody told me one time, and I know this is true. Throwaway is not the right word, but we don't bring forward a certain amount of germplasm every year because it's too tall and the ear is too high. Can you cross that with a short corn? Take a regular and a short and make a normal out of something that's absurdly tall, and find something cool, or I guess we can do whatever you want.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that. And that's what we're going to learn with the biotech trade. I believe that as we put the biotech trade in the current germplasm, it may be the best thing. It may not work as well as you think, right? It's because, but it also unlocks germplasm that we shied away from for exactly those reasons. Yeah. And we've known that grain yield, is a function of biomass, and that's why corn plants today are bigger than what they were, a while back, right? Yeah. And so we've constantly tried to modify that biomass index to our advantage to get the most yield with less, with as little forage as possible. Yeah. Because of that. So we're learning a lot, and with the things that we've got in our pipeline, the technologies, I do think that we'll be able to mitigate that pretty easily.
And with the biotech version as well, gets a lot easier to produce, right? Because it's a single dominant gene versus a recessive gene. So, we really haven't had a trait in the past, I don't think, that had to be in both parents, right?
Well, waxy, white, those type of things, yes, for sure.
But not a biotech
but trait. Not a biotech trait. And we put this in the female, and then you've got a tall male. We got better pollen flow. Maybe we'll have a few less AR2s and things like that to deal with.
People like to hear that.
No promises.
Most of my guys would like you to breed a hybrid that doesn't make any AR2s.
Yeah. But long story short, there could be some production opportunities with this. How we think about it, it just it creates an opportunity for better purity, everything.
Right. So and I think we've been participating in groundbreakers on a limited scale. The germplasm we've had in the recent years has performed way better north than where I'm at. But starting last year, I see some stuff that is doing well in my market as well. So we've been a little slower to jump on board with groundbreakers in my part of the world, but I think we're finally getting into some germplasm that can perform well for us, and so we're still participating in groundbreakers and looking forward to seeing the performance out of the newer Precion products.
Well, these native trait hybrids that we've introduced were originally bred for Iowa,
right?
And we get, especially in West Central Illinois, it's a different environment than what we see there, and so I'm not surprised with that, but. 1360, 1160. Hopefully those. I think that you need to take a look at those.
I had 1360 in a few trials last year, and it was generally right with the higher performing regular corn.
But beyond Preceon, I mean, we have corn rootworm 4 right on the cusp of that. For those that don't know what corn rootworm 4 is, it's essentially our next generation of corn rootworm protection. It'll be stacked with the above ground Tricepta trait combination. But the rootworm control is just absolutely phenomenal. It's got 2 new proteins that corn rootworm have never seen before. They're not cross-resistant to the current cry proteins that are in the market, and it's stacked with an enhanced RNAi technology. So, and that's really exciting.
So it'll be three-way rootworm mode, with 2 of the 3 being brand new, and the other one being RNAi, and then Tricepta above ground, right?
Yep, for sure. So that's really exciting. We've got, I think, between 50 and 100 hybrids in PCM4 testing that we're going forward with this year that I think will be potentially in plots, market development plots for 27. Assuming we can work in either stewarded or non-regulated environment, and then go from there.
So PCM4, for those of you listening, that would be the last year in breeding before a hybrid gets advanced to commercial. So that would be the year they get their hybrid name, decide which brand they're going to be deployed in, and then the following year they would be in market development plots, and then the following year after that would be the first year that we sell them commercially to farmers, the way it kind of typically goes. And I've seen some of the plots and results of that technology I've seen. I mean, it for in my market, SmartStax Pro looks invincible, but we don't have the pressure that Northern Illinois does. And, even in environments where SmartStax Pro is less than perfect, which it's, again, in my market, we've never seen that, but, we don't have the pressure that Northern Illinois does. And, SmartStax Pro is a pretty amazingly efficacious trait. But I've seen situations where corn rootworm 4 makes it look kind of shabby because it is just so perfect. So that's cool to see. And some people are desperate for better rootworm protection, and in other areas they're like, well, who cares? That's not my problem. But there are places where it's we've been really fortunate in Central Illinois. We had a wet year, very wet summer in 2015. That was about the time we switched to pyramided trait hybrids, and we also started raising less corn on corn. And so it was kind of a perfect storm there that kind of knocked that population back, and it's really never recovered. And so we just haven't really struggled. Now Jim Donnelly, my colleague in Northern Illinois, those guys are still fighting rootworm as bad today as we were in 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014. It's been a consistent problem for them, probably as bad of an issue for them as tar spot has been, ironically. And so their hunger for a better trait is probably a little higher than ours. But my guess is, as resistance continues to evolve and develop, we're going to have need for better traits and in our market as well.
Yep. 2 things with this is that one, it does not have the corn or the Herculex rootworm trait in it, so it does create some new opportunities from a germplasm perspective, and then to your point, we've got multiple different modes of actions that are highly effective against the corn rootworm. So we anticipate being able to have this to be our main and only platform for some time, because we anticipate having the longevity that we want, because we've got that multiple modes of action against the pest available right now.
And we've had, in the past, we've had single mode products that had a pretty good level of efficacy, but it didn't hold up because there was only one. But you would think better durability with 3 highly effective traits, and also the combination of BT working together with RNAi, we know is important as well. RNAi by itself is pretty lethal, but it's slower. And by the time it does its thing, they've already eaten quite a few roots. But you put a BT trait with it that slows down the feeding and gives the RNAi time to be lethal. That's pretty good combination.
In addition to that, we actually have some new innovative tar spot tolerance resistance that's coming through. We actually have a number of hybrids and PCM4 trials this year also. Not sure, I'm more interested in the next generation, the PCM3 class, where I think there's going to be some really, really interesting and commercial stuff. But this is a new level of I'll use the word tolerance today.
Okay.
By industry standards, not by our current standards, but by total industry standards. Yeah. These things, it's going to be exciting to show this off and see it in some broader acreage to see how well it performs and the best way to manage that.
Yeah. Well, and I talked when Josh was on with us, we talked a lot about, sometimes to get, better plant health, better disease resistance, sometimes in the past, especially, there's been a little bit of a linkage there. Sometimes you're giving up a little bit of yield potential, but if you're fighting a disease that's destroying your yield, you might be better off with starting with a little bit lower potential, but you don't have a 40 bushel or 50 bushel yield hit from the disease either. So, tar spot has certainly, been a focal point. In my market, I would say crown rot is probably, I think year in and year out, even more devastating than tar spot is. The combination of the two is worse than either one by itself. And then you throw a little southern rust in like we did last year and in 2021, then you really got a witch's brew of stuff going on. So, southern rust is a disease that, some people are speculating, maybe that will become more common to be a problem. I that's yet to be proven. In my opinion, I would say about 1 year out of 5, we have enough southern rust in central Illinois that it matters. And last year was certainly one of those years. Crown rot is something we have every year. Tar spot's something that unfortunately we're going to have every year. I think as the weather patterns change year in and year out, that influences what diseases are bad and how bad are they. And last year was sure one of those years that you're reminded of the importance of a good fungicide program or hybrids that have some level of resistance, or ideally both. And so that is exciting to hear. And I know folks that have seen that technology in the field. It's pretty impressive to look at. And that's a breeding trait, right? So that's not a biotech product.
I'm just going to leave it at that. Yeah. It's a novel source that we're bringing in to make effective, right? For sure. So you mentioned crown rot. That's a number one priority for us also. Little hard to identify and manage, but we've developed a pretty good process. I know you've talked about some of our evaluation methods with the Slim machine.
Yeah, I love Slim
and the things like that both that correlate pretty highly to that. And then we're also screening for it as best as we can also. And I feel the breeding team's making pretty good progress on that.
Well, I'm going to give them kudos on that because, I think the recognition that, you can really only evaluate a problem where it happens. And Josh and I talked about this as well. And if you average in the results of all the locations that don't have a problem, you kind of make the problem look like not a problem. And so we need to focus on identifying those sites where we have the problem and learn there. And to have the problem, you need the right kind of soil, the right kind of weather, and you need to plant early. And I think that's something the breeding group has recognized, and we're doing a better job getting some locations out early, getting those evaluations. And I think we've made tremendous strides just in the last 2 or 3 release classes on crown rot. And, I'm very comfortable that on that heavy crown rot acre, on the acre where a guy may or may not use fungicide, we've got tools in the lineup to deal with those environments a lot better than we did 5 years ago. So.
Well, it is interesting. I think we're all learning, as managing plant health all the way through the whole season has become, if you want to push yields to the next level, that's where we're doing it here as of late. We're planting generally fuller season maturities, which is leading to more kernel fill. The kernel weight is being a bigger factor of the yield equation, and to make that happen, we got to find a way to keep that plant healthy all year long, and that's something that my team's focused on as best as possible. So,
right. Yeah, I mean, we we get a lot of yield out of kernel weight. I love to pick on people that talk about test weight. It's not test weight that's important. It's the kernel weight, but not everybody agrees with me on that. I joke that I want test weight has nothing to do with yield on my tombstone. But there are a lot of people out there, some of them that raise 600 bushel corn, like to talk a lot about test weight, but that kernel weight, kernel depth, keeping that plant alive, through the season, taking advantage of all the good weather and resources that we have. I mean, there's a ton of yield that comes from that. And if that plant dies 2 or 3, or in a severe case, maybe 4 weeks before black layer, you're going to lose a lot of yield potential. And before you lose yield potential, you've already cannibalized the plant to where you've got not only lower yield, you've got crap for stalk quality, and all sorts of discouraging things start to happen at that point. So that's yeah, kudos to the breeding group for putting a lot of focus on things like tar spot, crown rot. We've for a long time had a good level of southern rust resistance. It's just until recently people didn't think it needed to be deployed for northern Iowa and Minnesota, and I would say that's kind of a fluke thing, and I'm not sure they're going to need rust protection year in and year out. But who knows? That if they do, we've got it. We just got to breed it into that RM product.
Yeah. No, it's every year is different. We tend to we tend to react. Hopefully not overreact. But yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, we'll leave the overreaction to us in the field. We tend to do that, and it causes you a little bit of heartburn. And let's see, where are we at? So how about are there anything that you would consider a goal or objective, or things that you're working towards on improvements, and anything along those lines that you'd be comfortable sharing?
Yeah. Well, one, I'm committed. I've had the chance to see introduce Roundup corn when I started with DeKalb, in its first years or so, and then
you just missed out on the Sethoxidum resistant corn. That didn't go too far.
Yeah, so. No, it didn't, and it wasn't very good either. And the old SR corn, and then obviously the fun we had with launching rootworm technology.
Yeah, that was fun.
Digging those roots and seeing those 3-foot long stringers come out of the ground versus I really am excited about where Preceon goes long term. It's going to be a slower, more methodical launch, because I think to get the value out of that, you need to manage it a little differently. But to get the true value out of it, right, to really take yields to the next level. But beyond that, that's what I'm really excited about. And then the last goal is can we? I really think we can. Over the next 5 to, I really think we can get closer to that 200 bushel national yield average with corn.
Yeah,
I really do, and that's something from an agronomy perspective. What the breeding is doing with their precision breeding, breeding to designing hybrids rather than selecting hybrids. I think we're on a cusp to really start making that stuff happen.
Right,
and. We always say wait till next year when it comes to the advancement class, but this PCM3 class that we had last year, the yield results on those look really, really interesting.
Yeah.
So
there's a new one that went to DeKalb this year that I teased Josh about this when he was on with me. I'm calling a little BS on the breeding date on that one, because I don't think anything can be that good. But if it's real, that thing is a monster. And I agree with you, Scott. We didn't talk about this before we went on air, but I've got this silly goal of working for 40 years. So I've got 7 years left if I make my 40-year goal. And I think before I retire, I think we'll hang a 200 on the U.S. average corn yield. And we'd have been scary close to that this year if the wheels hadn't fell off the train there right before harvest. I mean, if you tacked another 20 bushel on Illinois and another 20 bushel on Iowa, we'd have been pretty darn close.
Yeah.
And everybody in Illinois in July thought they were all going to raise 300 bushel corn, and we had the potential. Got off to a great start, had great stands, great timely planting, plenty of moisture. Ended up with cloudy days, too much rain in July, a lot of disease, and we still ended up with a very good crop, but it was not what it could have been. And so that I think that potential is definitely there. And I can remember when we made a pretty bold prediction that we were going to double the yield of corn by a certain date, which we didn't quite reach. But still, I mean, it wasn't that long ago that the U.S. average corn yield was 140 bushel. And I think we're knocking on the door of that being 200, and with with corn prices where they are today, that spooks people a little bit. It's like, well, we need we don't need more corn right now, but
we might plant 99 million or 99 million acres of corn this year, is at least what the field tells me once in a while.
Yeah, well, that we might be hedging a little bit on you there. Try that's because that we are down to that last painful conversation I wanted to have with you. So I guess talk a little bit about how does a seed company decide how much they need to grow?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and me and my team work on that. That's what we're responsible for is the size of the crop plan, and then work with product supply to make it happen, right? But we look at industry analysts, we look at what the market's doing, and then we know what our crop plan is and how much stretch we can. We know we know our market share. We know how many hundreds of thousand units we need for every million acres, right? So how can we stretch to operate within a range, right? And our 26 supply challenges really started in 25 after the outcome. It started actually, it probably started about April 15th of 25. We built a crop plan for the low 90s, which is right in the middle. The last 10 years, corn acres ranged from 88 to the max over the last 10 years was about 94 and a half. Well, then 25 happened, and our forecast really grew after we kind of finalized our crop plans, or for the most part. And next thing you know, we ended up with nearly 99 million acres, right? So that led to more usage than expected, and then challenged this year's crop plan even more. And normally every year we see decline after record acres. We see a decline. We got stocks to use ratios out there pushing 13% this year, and that say, hey, probably don't need as many corn acres, right? But what's really interesting, the metrics that I see it changing is just the every grower that I talk to, whether I'm in North Dakota, the Midwest, Iowa, or even down south, neither crop is very profitable to grow. Corn is more intensive and requires more equity and expense up front to grow. But they got more confidence in the yield potential.
That's right.
And that's why they've chosen corn, even though it takes less money, and even the profitability on average may pencil out closer on soybeans.
Well, and
so it's crazy.
And this varies across the country, and you got to think about the whole country. I'm just worried about my little piece of it, but in our part of the world, let's be honest, no disrespect to the soybeans as a crop, but corn is their favorite. And there are just people that it doesn't always come down strictly to economics. It's what do you want to do? And to your point, I think there's a lot of growers, especially in the Midwest, that are more confident in their ability to hit the ball out of the park on a corn crop than they are a bean crop. And so sometimes when economists would say, well, corn acres are going to be down because costs are up and profitability favors soybeans, that's not necessarily what the farmer does. And that's that's what when you're getting feedback from people in the field, like, well, I'm not sure corn acres are going to go down. I think they probably will go down from where they were, but they're still going to be high, and probably higher maybe than some of the quote unquote experts would say they should be, based on the relationship prices. And then things have gotten kind of crazy here in the last few days on prices. So who knows? And it makes me a little bit nervous. You've got the risk of what hybrids you grow. And then you got the risk of how do they yield, and then you got the risk of how many acres your guy's going to plant, and then we'll throw you a curveball every year when we try to sell something 3 times as much of it as we told you we wanted 12 months ago. And I know, you know, if we could ever forecast perfectly and convince all of our customers that they still want what we thought they would want 12 months ago, even if they don't, all this would work easier and nicer. But those are all the variables that we have to try to manage in that. So I guess we've been through a painful spring this year with supply being super tight. You know, what I guess what are we planning to do in 2026 to make 2027 and 28 a little easier to navigate?
Yeah, no, we're well, first of all, we're building a much larger crop plan. We're planning on a much, you know, for the average corn acres in the U.S. to be much higher than what we planned on in the past. We're also we're excited about the demand that you guys are all forecasting for too. So and with some of the, you know, with the performance we've had and with the additions of the people that we put in the field, we an experience that we're creating where we see an opportunity to grow more too. So more market share growth built into the plan. So more acres, more market share growth, which then drives how many units what you might need. And then we've also changed our utilization so that, okay, can I cover over 100 million acres, you know, with confidence? And I can. And am I going to have too much corn to where I can't produce as much new stuff next year if we only have, you know, 90 million acres or 89 million acres? I feel good about that, right? So we're really trying to hone in and have made those adjustments, just a bigger plan that can facilitate more possibilities given the volatility that we got in the market.
And I don't really feel like I need to ask this question because I trust that you guys, you know, can do the math on this. You know, I would assume our current production facilities have the ability to grow that much in 1 year. I mean, that sounds like a pretty heavy lift for those guys.
It is one of the largest crop plans that we have record of recent anyway. And they're up to the task, but they're starting right now. So they're already planning on labor force and, you know, do we need, you know, working out the shifts and all that stuff to ensure that we can get this all accomplished. So that's in the works right now.
People used to talk about winter production in corn. Does anybody do commercial winter production anymore?
Very, very, very few. Very, very few. In fact, we've just not had commercial success growing anything much over 108-day product. And really, to get it back in time to meet the market, it's really 100-day or less.
I mean, we plant a month earlier than we used to. So
and so it's very, very little. And honestly, we've also just not had reliable transportation to bring it back and forth with everything that's been happening in the world. You know, it's just not a reliable, and it is. We are watching our costs too. It just costs a lot of money to do that, right? And so and
I think that was, you know, some people, you know, when they realized that, you know, by the time we knew how many corn acres they were, and we knew that, oh shoot, we should have built a bigger plan. Well, it was too late to build a bigger plan. And people are like, well, why don't you just go to winter with it? Well, you know, it's really challenging to, you know, we can grow a little bit for, like, you know, parent seed increases and plot seed and, you know, research needs and that kind of stuff. But to have, you know, commercial acre scale production in winter in South America somewhere is just not really feasible. So.
But we don't like being tight either. So from our perspective, so we don't want this problem or challenge to happen again. We want to make sure we can deliver what the customer wants and go from there.
Well, it's you know, I'm very, you know, the new class of products that we're, you know, putting in market development plots this year for the first time. There's several that we're very excited about. You know, there's a lot of momentum, you know, behind a lot of these products, a lot of excitement around the new ones. We got more aggressive with our crop plan on the new products than we have for the past several years, which you guys like it when the sales teams want to get behind a new product first year out the gate and run with it. And we blew past what Josh was able to commit to growing on several of these new products. And so that's exciting to see, and it'll be fun for me to get out in plots and see these things for the first time live in person. And I'm really enthused about the direction that we're headed on genetics and disease resistance and some of the things that are coming. So I think there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So, all right. Well, anything else you want to add before we jump off here, Scott? I probably kept you long enough, but
no, I appreciate the opportunity. I guess let's all wish the Illini the best in the tournament coming up here.
Yeah.
I'd love to knock out a few of our other Big Ten rivals.
Sure. It's always good. Kind of hard to know which team's going to show up on any given night there sometimes.
Exactly, but be rooting them on and excited about that.
Yeah. All right. Well, you take care. Have a good spring, and if you want to ride around and look at some corn this summer, give me a call.
Love to do that.
All right.
All right. Thank you.
See you, man. Take care.
No, it's fun.
All right.